Welcome to CISA's storytelling event, Field Notes. I am so glad to be here with all of you. My name is Phil Corman, and I'm the director of CISA, which stands for Community Involved in Sustaining Agriculture. For over 30 years, we have been strengthening local agriculture and local farms, and every day of the year we are there with our farmers trying to help them make their businesses run a little more smoothly, a little bit more profitably, to be financially sustainable, to grow food for all of us. And we are also there with all of our partners trying to get more local food to everybody in the community. And we are here for all of you every single day of the year to make sure you know where local food can be found and to help you engage with us to build a local food economy that is just and resilient and better than this national food system. So we know last year was rough in so many ways. It's been more and more urgent for CISA to step up during this past year. And we're so glad that all of us can be here together to listen, to learn, to cry and laugh as we hear all these great stories. So thank you to all of you for coming. I want to say that we so appreciate the Academy of Music for able to host us in their beautiful home, which we call our home today. Their staff is amazing in helping us create the best possible performance for all of you. I want to thank our lead business sponsor, River Valley Co-op, which is there every day for all of us. And I want to thank all the business sponsors. Yes. And now I get to do kind of what I do every week. I've been seeing this guy like for 12 or 13 years. Now, it's not my therapist, okay? My therapist is shy, not coming on stage. But this person has been helping CISA bring stories every week for that 12 or 13 years about local farms. And he is amazing. And with Khalees Smith this year, he's done the fabulous 413. And he's on daily from 3 to 4 p.m. on New England Public Media, or where you get your local podcasts. Let me introduce the one and only, thankfully only, Monty Belmonte.
You want me to bring a couch out here, Phil, so we can do our therapy session? Huge round of applause for Phil Corman from CISA. And behind the scenes over here, Jacob Nelson, who's put on this entire event for you this evening. I am Monty. I get to co-host the fabulous 413 with Khalees Smith every afternoon from 3 to 4 p.m. I've been told by one of our tech guys that it doesn't look like me on the side of a bus, but it does look like Khalees. I'm hanging on for dear life on the side of a bus. I do get to tell these stories or hear these stories with Phil and with Jacob and with Khalees week in and week out. And a word you're going to hear a lot tonight, I'm sure, is the word resilient. I think of last year at this time, we already knew that there were going to be no peaches on the East Coast after the weather that had happened in February, and yet those farmers were resilient. You think of the hard frost of May 18th that decimated so many of our local apples, but our apple farmers remained resilient. We fast forward to the floods of July and the heavy rains throughout the rest of the summer. I remember talking to Courtney Whiteley, a Jamaican farmer at Grow Food Northampton, saying, last year we prayed for rain. This year we prayed it would stop. If I'd known better, I would have built an ark, he said in his amazing Jamaican accent on our show. And yet, he wanted to plant again. He wanted to remain resilient. Just last week on the show, we went to go visit Red Fire Farm in Granby, where Ryan and Sarah Voiland walked us through the decimation of that old barn from 100 years ago made out of wood that has just been charred to a crisp, nothing left. But they're going to rebuild right there because they are resilient. Their resiliency keeps us fed. Farmers and their refusal to give up keep us sustained. We need to sustain them. And CISA does an incredible job of taking care of our local farming community. We need to take care of CISA and our local farming community as well. And we also need to hear the stories of the people that are remaining resilient and keeping us fed. And tonight, you'll have 10 opportunities to hear 10 stories in a variety of languages about our local farming community. I'm pleased to introduce the farm manager of a farm that's named after a 17th century Nonotuck leader on whose land we now reside. It's also a fun farm name to say. From Quonquont Farm, please welcome to Field Notes, Leslie Harris.
It's a 95-degree day in August, and I am mowing one of the many meadows at Quonquont Farm. I'm driving a 1970 Ford 4000 tractor, pulling an equally vintage brush mower. And I'm going along a stone wall where there are tree branches reaching down in front of me. And before I know it, one of those branches knocks the vertical exhaust pipe off the front of my tractor. It goes right down between my wheels and with a thwang out the back of my mower. And at almost that exact moment, I hear the unmistakable of the mower blades hitting a rock, and then the whole thing feels different. So I finally get it all powered off, come back around, afraid of what I'm going to find, and indeed, there against the stone walls, my crumpled up exhaust pipe. But when I bend down and look under the mower, my worst fears are realized. The entire mower assembly, the giant blades, the enormous steel stump jumper, everything that should be suspended from the top of that mower on the ground, sheared off at the vertical rod that connects it to the gearbox. Nothing for it but the long walk of shame back up to the farm store, where one of our farm's owners and my boss, Ann, is waiting. Now, if you know Ann, you know that she is a woman of few words. But if I had $1 for every time I was out mowing something and Ann said to me, "What'd you hit out there?" I'd be a very wealthy woman. See, it was my first season as the farm manager at Quonquont. It wasn't the first I'd been around. I'd been coming around for about 4 or 5 years before that because I'm married to the farm's other owner, Allison. So we'd come every day after work or on the weekends, and we'd run our dogs around, and then we'd help out with farm chores. I'd carry buckets of mulch in the blueberries, or pick apples, or help farm store customers. But my favorite job? Mowing. I love mowing. I'd go find Ann wherever she was. I'd say, "Hey, Ann, you got anything needs mowed?" And she'd look at me and say, "Sure." And I'd go run something over. I was in heaven. I had a job. I had a career. I'd worked for 25 years or more for nonprofit humane societies in different parts of the country. I'd spent 20 years at the Dakin Humane Society here in the Pioneer Valley as their executive director. Thanks. They're a force for good, and I was very proud of the work I did there. But I was also exhausted. And when I would compare how I felt at my day job to how I felt when I would come to Quonquont, it became really clear to me that it was time for a change. So one day, with all the butterflies in my tummy, I went to see Ann, and I said, "Ann, would you make me the farm manager?" And she looked at me and she said, "Sure." Now, Ann knew that I'd worked on farms before. I'd milked cows and mucked stalls, and I'd helped out around Quonquont. And she had served on the Dakin board, so she knew I knew how to run a business. But she also knew I didn't know the first thing about growing apples. And so she took a huge chance on me that day, and I will be forever grateful. I have this memory of the first winter that I was the farm manager, and I'm out in the orchard, and I'm learning to prune apple trees, and we're standing in the snow. Now, I have a sense of self-confidence that is completely unwarranted at a moment like this, okay? So I take my loppers, cut a branch, right? Isn't that what you do? And I look over, and there's Anne. She looks at that cut. She looks at me. She says, what's the plan, Leslie? Because I didn't know what I was doing, and apple pruning is planning. It's preparing the tree for the coming growing season, but also a growing season 50 years from now. And you have to know what you're doing. And if there was a theme to my first many years as the farm manager, it was that I didn't know what I was doing. The one part of apple growing with which I had experience was the picking of the apples. And it turned out that was the easy part. Everything else is the hard part. For instance, every single living organism on planet Earth wants to eat your apples. It's not just us. It's deer, it's bears, it's birds, it's bugs, it's worms, it's fungus, bacterium. They're all coming for your apples. That's what it feels like. And you as the grower have to know when to intervene, what to do, how to do it. What's the exact right timing? How does the weather change what you do? And there's Mother Nature. She's throwing you curveballs, right? Not enough rain, too much rain, early heat, late freezes. Farming and climate change is confounding for the most experienced grower, but for a rookie like me, it's rough growing. So every year at the end of the growing season, I make a list that says, here are the things I got right, and that is the short list. And then I make this long list that is, here are the things I need to get right. Here are the things I need to learn, and the things I need to do better, and the things I need to do differently. But I love this job. I love the puzzle of it. I love the people I work alongside and how hard we all work. There's this job I do in the fall where I hook our brand new brush mower to the back of my tractor and I drive a half an hour through the woods. I come out into these glorious meadows with the dark hemlocks against the red maples and the brown oak leaves and the golden blue stem grass and the red-tailed hawks circling overhead, looking for an easy meal from a displaced vole. And I think, I'm going to mow for 4 days. I am the luckiest person on earth, not just because I get to do this one job that I really love, but because I am fortunate to be one of the stewards of this land. So every spring, right now, I take that list out into my orchard of the things I'm going to do right to get a bumper crop. And there's Mother Nature looking over my shoulder and whispering in my ear, what's the plan, Leslie? Thank you.
Leslie Harris. And a huge round of applause to our banjo player, Norma Jean Haynes, who has the unenviable position, like the orchestra at the Oscars tonight, of playing off our speakers if they go on a little bit too long. But wonderful banjo playing. Solamente hablo un poquito en español. Pero cuando viajo a Puerto Rico, quizás, puedo practicar un poquito más. Who am I kidding? I'm a white guy. As soon as I go anywhere in Puerto Rico, they're going to talk to me in English. But I try to practice. But we're all going to get to practice our Spanish a little bit more right now when we hear this story from the person who is a minister, a performer, and the outreach coordinator for Nuestras, Raices. Darwin, Jerry, Cruz.
Buenas tardes a todos. Mi nombre es Darwin Jerry Cruz y vengo de la preciosa isla de Puerto Rico, linda playa, lindo verano casi todo el año. Hace 23 años Vivo aquí en los Estados Unidos, en Springfield, Massachusetts. Vine para trabajar, vine porque dicen que América es la ciudad de los sueños, que América es la ciudad de las oportunidades, pero no supe cuánto había que sudar cuando llegué aquí a los Estados Unidos. Tuve que vestirme de valentía, tuve que vestirme de mucha fe, tuve que empoderarme porque sufrí muchos obstáculos, sufrí muchos problemas. Pero ¿saben algo? Estudié en Puerto Rico un bachillerato en ciencias de las enfermerías y quería trabajar aquí porque aquí se ganaba bien y aquí podía hacer más cosas. Pero siempre que yo entregaba una aplicación en un hospital, me la negaban, porque no tanto fue uno de los obstáculos más grandes, fue el idioma. El idioma. Caí en depresión, caí en angustia y terminé trabajando mi primer trabajo limpiando carros. No sabía nada de carros. Terminé limpiando hojas de otoño. Cuánto lloraba con todo ese frío. Pero ¿qué pasó? Me puse a caminar por la ciudad, a visitar cada agencia, enlace de familias, Community Education Projects, hacen ya 23 años, los cuales doy las gracias, no faltando Nuestras Raíces, hace 23 años, que me dieron la mano y me encaminaron a lo que soy ahora. Conocí muchas personas, entre ellas que me dieron la mano, que me dieron el apoyo de seguir hacia adelante, entre ellas mi amada esposa, Samaris, mi hija Yamilet y mi nieta, Naila. Así que le doy las gracias por esa bella familia. Doy las gracias también por todas las personas que me dieron la mano y me encaminaron para trabajar. Ahora mismo estoy trabajando en Nuestras Raíces y mi primer trabajo con ellos fue tener la mobile market, visitar cada edificio de Holyoke. Tenía 5 edificios, llevando lo mejor de los vegetales de Nuestras Raíces, de la 24 John Ferry Road en Holyoke, Massachusetts. Ya donde están los agricultores, como le decimos, los bellos finqueros, los cuales yo les decía, voy a visitar los edificios, las residencias, y ellos me traían lo mejor, libre de todo químico, libre de toda sustancia química para no hacer daño a la salud de la comunidad. Siendo enfermero, reconozco la salud de la gente. Cuando iba en la mobile market llena de vegetales, de lechugas, onion, iba cantando. Y cuando me paraba, ya la gente ya no se esperaba para poder comprar esos vegetales. El pasado año también comenzamos dando clases de diabetes, prediabetes, diabetes tipo 1 y diabetes tipo 2. ¿Por qué dar clases? Porque es la alta incidencia que Holyoke tiene, una alta incidencia de pacientes con diabetes. Estamos dando las clases en Nuestras Raíces y ahora se añadieron 4 programas más. Estamos con la ayuda de UMass, estamos con la ayuda de el Holyoke Health Center, el cual nos provee los participantes para que ellos no caigan en las condiciones crónicas que muchos caen cuando llegan a los hospitales, saliendo con condiciones de cangrenas, con fallo cardíaco. ¿Por qué? Porque quizás muchas veces se toman los medicamentos o no se los toman, pero mi amor por la gente es importante. Mi amor de que ellos aprendan es importante. Por algunos grupos de estas clases, algunos recibían cajas de vegetales. ¿Por qué cajas de vegetales? Porque quizás son personas que no pueden salir en un frío, que no pueden salir en tiempos que está lloviendo, o quizá por sus debilidades, o quizá por su bastón, o que están solos. ¿Y qué pasa? Tienen sus cajas de vegetal en su casa que pueden hacer, como decimos el buen puertorriqueño, un buen sancochito, unas buenas sopas. Así que yo siempre digo que lo que tú comes, que comer la buena nutrición saludablemente es tu medicina. Así que siempre digo que también se le habla a los participantes de las condiciones crónicas. De las condiciones crónicas, de la ceguera, de las piernas, que tengan mucho cuidado. Al finalizar las clases, tuve muchos testimonios bonitos, el cual me sentí sumamente orgulloso, que lo que yo pude dar, ellos me lo devolvieron con amor. Ellos me dijeron, Darwin, fui al hospital con una uña incrustada, con el dedo super morado, uña del pie, que no es fácil, para el podiatra pues le ayudó y le dio unos antibióticos. Ella me dijo, Darwin, ya estoy sana, ya estoy bien gracias a tus clases. Y yo le dije, gracias a ti porque nunca faltaste. Nunca faltaste a las clases. Otros bajaron de peso porque también de las clases que estábamos dando se les daba clases de nutrición. ¿Cómo tú puedes cambiar algunos ingredientes a ingredientes orgánicos, ingredientes saludables que no te hagan daño? ¿Cómo tú lo puedes hacer? Instruyéndote, educándote. Así que hay otros que también me dijeron, Darwin, yo cuando comencé contigo a tomar las clases tenía 250, casi 300 de fasting blood sugar, del azúcar alta. Ahora, al final de la clase, estoy en 110 miligramos por dilución. Y yo le dije, formidable, sigan para adelante. Todas esas personas que tomaron las clases ahora mismo son portavoces y se comunican con las otras personas de la comunidad, llevando lo mejor, educándolos también, y les digo cualquier información, aquí estoy para que me llamen, o están los médicos, así que no se me sienten, sigan hacia adelante y no se rindan, que la diabetes es una condición que si tú te cuidas puede durar muchos años más de vida. Así que hasta aquí mi corta historia y muchas gracias.
Maravilloso, Darwin. Yeri Cruz. When we launched the Fabulous 413 on NEPM, I had a vision that I wanted to be like another PBS host, Mr. Rogers, who's like my hero, except I swear a lot more. Do you remember the episode where Mr. Rogers went to, say, Eric Carl's studio on Main Street in Northampton, or when he went to the crayon factory and showed you how crayons got made? Nothing makes me more excited about doing the show than when I get to do something like that. And I didn't go to where the crayons get made. I went to where the mushrooms get made. I went to what's like Willy Wonka's chocolate factory of mushrooms. And it's right here in our valley. And our next story is from the person behind the mushrooms. Please welcome to Field Notes, Julia Coffey.
In 2010, I decided I wanted to work for myself and in agriculture. I had experience growing mushrooms, herbs, flowers, other produce, and while I felt more confident with crops from the plant kingdom, everybody was doing that here already. And so I started growing mushrooms in a closet in my basement because they were underrepresented in the Valley food system. In the beginning, I grew about 30 pounds a week, and now Mycoterra Farm is the largest mushroom farm in Massachusetts, and that means things are a lot bigger and more expensive. At the heart of our operation is a large commercial autoclave. We use this to sterilize the sawdust medium that we grow our mushrooms on. It is essentially a 5-foot diameter, 33-foot long cylindrical pressure cooker that allows us to achieve the temperatures we need to kill the other microbes that would compete with the species that we're trying to grow. This autoclave has helped us achieve the scale that we have. However, over the past few years, I've watched the inevitable process of oxidation you get with steam and steel over time. That's right, it's getting rusty, and I was in search of a replacement. But they simply don't make them like they used to. While our autoclave is great for cooking sawdust, the commercial food processing technologies have come a long way since early process steam. And when the factory that made our autoclave burned down, they never rebuilt. And so there's few and far between. Luckily, last summer, a friend of mine reached out. He happened to have an autoclave in a warehouse that they were looking to get rid of. And so negotiations were swift, and I purchased it for a song. The freight was more than the cost of the autoclave itself. However, it was an opportunity I couldn't miss. And so I booked a hauler to transport the autoclave from Washington State to Massachusetts. It was a long trip and a lot of anticipation as we waited for it. But finally, delivery day arrived. The local crane service is pulling down the driveway, and the truck driver had been waiting pretty antsy all morning. And I was worried because although we hadn't flooded on our farm in the rains that saturated the valley the previous week, the road was still really muddy, and the place where we had to put the crane was quite muddy. I had been refreshing the weather app on my phone all morning, just watching these little pink blips on the radar to make sure that they didn't materialize into anything larger to worry about. And so just as we got the crane in place, the skies opened and a deluge commenced. Still, the little pink blips weren't that sizable, but the storm was just intense, and it seemed to be hovering directly over our farm. The rain came down in sheets. It wasn't just raindrops, it was a deluge, and there was white water coming down the hill from the west. The crane crew, despite being a gritty, die-hard bunch, they were grounded and crouched, waiting out the storm. The crane was crouched like them, with its boom lowered to lower the risk of lightning strike. And so we're just waiting out this rain, and while we wait out the storm, I make rounds. It's a Friday on the farm, and Fridays are always a big push to wrap up the week. And I just keep refreshing that weather app. For a couple hours, the rain just keeps coming down until finally the storm broke. And so quickly, with everybody ready to be done, the autoclave is belted into its rigging and lifted into the sky. And I slog around the back of the farm to make sure the place that we had prepared for the autoclave is ready to put it down. And I look up and see my crew pushing a wall of water out of the building, armed with brooms and squeegees. They're parting the waters, and I grimace. Just the previous week, I was talking to a farmer friend and telling them, we're high and dry, we don't flood here. But I didn't have time to think about that right now. I have thousands of dollars worth of equipment hovering over my building. And so confident that my crew is dealing with the floodwaters, I go back outside with my eye on the sky to this piece of equipment over the building. And then again, the lightning cracks. I look at those blips. They're still on the phone. It's still not a big storm, but they seem to be regenerating right over the farm. And with that crack of lightning, the crane operator didn't hesitate to move the crane over and down. The first half of the autoclave was put on skates just inside the building, and our tractor moved forward to push the autoclave in. And in this moment of truth, the tractor moves up, and, well, it just kind of teetered there. Our resident tractor whisperer urged it to push 3 tons of steel ahead, and I could see the back wheels lifting off the ground, and realize it needs a counterweight. So I didn't hesitate to jump on board. And then my cousin Jan jumped on next to me. And finally, John on the sideboard gave us the traction we needed to get this autoclave moved in. And another crack of lightning, and Jan and I look at each other, realizing this might be the last stupid thing we do together. But finally, the tractor lurched forward, and we pushed that autoclave in, and we put it crudely down on blocks so the crane could unhook and move away. And once the autoclave is down, I only have a minute to just take a quick breath, because I have to turn my attention to the flooding. While our eyes were on the sky, our building had filled with water. The storm water had moved all kinds of debris around, blocking the drainage, and water was building up on the outside of the building. Miraculously, we were able to get the water down and out. It flooded not only the warehouse, but the inner sterile lab. See, the greenhouses are made to get wet, and water isn't a big problem there. But this is the lab. This is the sterile place where we get our mushrooms started. We put all hands on deck, and we got that water out. We put fans in place to dry things out, and we were able to avoid any major damages. And looking back at the day, while the autoclave delivery was really a feat, what sits with me most was the sight of my crew parting the waters. They had my back. And that was just like how I saw this community rally in support of the farms that flooded last summer. And that is a really powerful thing when your friends, your family, and your community are there and doing what's needed without being asked. And so while this was an experience in the unpredictable nature of nature and how the best laid plans of a farmer can basically collide with nature in all kinds of interesting ways. And I feel like this is a call of action to us all. For me, it means practical investments in things on my farm, like gutters and drainage ditches. For our community, it means investing in the farmers that are stewards of the land here, that provides environmental services for future generations. And the best thing about supporting local farms is that we get to eat some of the best food in the world grown right here in Western Mass. Thank you.
That crew at Mycoterra sure seem like fun guys. Another story of resilience, and we've heard a lot of them, and we'll continue to hear them from these farmers, this Field Notes. It takes such resilience to just be a farmer, but imagine having to be a farmer and being a refugee. We're going to hear a story of that type of resilience from a peer teacher from All Farmers, Bhujel.
Namaste, good afternoon. I was born in a small village in Bhutan. Farming was the main source of food and income in our family. The main food crops that we grow in Bhutan were paddy, millet, wheat, corn. The cash crops were ginger, jute, tapioca, fruits and vegetables. We also reared animals like cows, oxen, goats, pigs, poultry, which we used to earn cash. I was inspired in farming by my parents right from my childhood when I was in primary school. It was interesting to work with my parents and elders in my field. I used to follow my dad when he was plowing the land with oxen, and I loved digging and sowing seeds. As I grew up, I could do most of the farming activities. In high school, we used to farm vegetables and flowers once a week as part of our studies. When I was 18 years old, there was a political agitation in Bhutan. The main cause of the political conflict was that we, the people living in the southern part of Bhutan, were of Nepali origin. We have our own culture, language, tradition, and dress, but the government forced us to follow their culture, tradition, and dress and language. The army force and wrongfully arrested people, including my dad. The army even set fires to homes in our villages until we are forced to leave the country and go to Nepal. At that time, I had been for a job in the capital city, Thimphu. I didn't even know my family had left our village, and I met them on the way home before the bus stop while traveling home. It was a big surprise. For the next 20 years, I and my family lived in the refugee camp. We had a very miserable life, sheltering under a plastic roof, facing heavy temperatures and heavy storms, high temperatures and heavy storms. I also did backyard gardening in the refugee camp, which from where we produce vegetables that add to some extent to our food granted by the UN agencies. In 2008, we learned about a program that resettles refugees in different countries, and we were excited. My parents and my family arrived in Massachusetts, Westfield, Massachusetts in 2012. Life was challenging at the beginning. I had to learn new language and find work. I also had to learn how to drive and about American food habits. I didn't know about Dunkin' Donuts, McDonald's, and buffets. We miss some of our food from back home, but we didn't even know if we could do backyard gardening on our rental property. When the landlord allowed us to farm, we were so happy. We started growing vegetables in the backyard, importing seeds from Nepal and Bhutan. I felt proud in 2020 when I could buy a house with a big backyard. I continued farming, naming it Drukyul farm. The name translates to mean the land of dragon or Bhutan farm. By farming, we get our own organic food and earn some income from it. I also sell some of my products in the community market and even out of state. It was around 2022 that I became a peer teacher with All Farmers. This is an organization in Springfield that supports refugee and immigrant farmers. With All Farmers, I learned different farming skills, new techniques, attended workshops that helped me a lot on my farm, and shared farming ideas among our community members. When I tried to schedule appointments with my elders, they put me off saying later. That is in the beginning. But there is one big difference in farming here. In Bhutan and in the refugee camps, people did not do budgeting and record keeping. We farmed with whatever we had available, which was very little. Through All Farmers, we taught community farmers how to earn more money with better budgeting and record keeping. This impressed our community farmers, and they suddenly started calling for home visit appointments. Today, I feel proud to be able to teach our community farmers the new techniques as they taught me farming as a young boy back in Bhutan. Thank you all listening my stories. Dhanyavad.
Thank you, Hem. And now, evidently, Bhutan runs on Duncan as well. So, the next farmer, I got to see their resiliency in action the day after the July floods at Grove Food, Northampton. The devastation was incredible. Resiliency in the fields is one thing, resiliency in the home is another. And to have to maintain both of those is part of the story we're going to hear next from Flowerwork Farm in Florence. Suna. Turgay.
During my college years, I fell in love with a summer camp. An overnight camp in Vermont, down a long dirt road, up the side of a mountain to the middle of nowhere, where I met my best friends, who maybe they're here now, maybe they're not. And in the summer, that forest is filled with forts and songs and epic dance parties. So when I have the opportunity to direct this camp, many years later, I jump at that opportunity. This time with a baby under my arms, I go down that dirt road, and it turns out being a camp counselor is even more fun than being a director is even more fun than being a counselor. This time I get to pick the staff and decide where the money in the budget goes and write grants for things that I personally care about, like connecting with local farmers. And I get to work with cooks who are as excited about fresh eggs and heirloom tomatoes and real maple syrup on pancakes. And the thing I think is most important about camp is that the reason it exists, its purpose, is to create community and to spark joy and curiosity and connect with people and connect with nature and create a place where we can all feel like we're in a safe place where we can challenge and grow. 4 years later, when I had my younger child, we found ourselves in the intensive care unit and learned that she has a rare genetic disorder and a whole constellation of medical issues and developmental delays and communication disorder and autism. And so I quit my job, which is common for people who have kids with complex needs, regardless of their financial situation, because they require specialized care. She had doctor's appointments and therapy appointments and surgeries and recoveries and prolonged illnesses. And despite this, she's really fun, and she's really funny, and she doesn't want to miss a thing. And she's lucky enough to end up at this great elementary school that embraces her and includes her in everything, which makes the transition to middle school really hard, where she's separated from her only friends, segregated into a special room, and it's made clear to her that she is different and that she will no longer be allowed to be part of all the things. And this makes her angry, it makes her anxious, and it makes her isolated. And school becomes not a safe place for her anymore, so she stops going. And this makes me angry and isolated. And then COVID happens. And then I'm relieved because now nobody goes to school, and now everybody is angry and anxious and isolated. And, you know, it's okay for us because we have a small homestead and the chickens need tending and the seed needs sowing and the beds need prepping, and she's by my side, never leaves my side, and luckily she's into it, and I'm surprised by how invested she is. She really likes a task, something that has a beginning and an end that can be crossed off a list. So we're making lists, we're crossing things off lists, and the garden looks more beautiful than it's ever looked. And the weeks and the months and the years go by, and suddenly it's time to go back to school, and now it's high school time. And it's a big, unfamiliar school with big people, unfamiliar faces, they're all masked, and it's not going very well. On most days, I'm picking her up at 11 o'clock. And on this particular day, the school's calling me to come pick her up because for the third time that day, she has ripped up the worksheet they've put in front of her and made it into a little ball and thrown it at the kid sitting next to her. And she has like a little behavior clipboard, and now she's received 3 marks for disruptive and 3 marks for aggressive behavior, and they're escorting her off the school, and I'm picking her up, and she's mad, and she just wants to go home and get in bed and sleep until dinner time. And I'm feeling pretty bad myself because I've dedicated my life to her health and well-being, and the educators are now starting to point their fingers at me and questioning my competence as a parent. And so we think it's time to look for a different option. And there are none. But then I remember a friend of mine talking about this place where he used to still grows mushrooms called Prospect Meadow Farm. And I contact the director, and he says, well, we've never had any children work here before. But he says, bring her, let's see how it goes. So it's a farm that they have farm shares, they have animals, they have eggs, they have mushrooms, and it's all staffed by people with developmental disabilities. And so we show up, and on the first day, she's there for 5 minutes. On the second day, she's there for 10 minutes because the goats are so friendly and inviting. And by the end of the week, I get a message from the program director who's really excited that she's made it for 20 minutes, that she actually came into the building and she had a chance to read through the list of chores on the board. By the end of the summer, she's getting her own list, and with pride, she's crossing off all the things that she's done, and she's leaving the house happy, and she's coming home happy. And by the time it's Brussels sprout season, I get another message from the program director, and this time the message says that she was harvesting Brussels sprouts and she picked one off the stalk and she threw it at the person working next to her, which caused that person to laugh and pick up the Brussels sprout and throw it right back at her, which caused her to laugh, and that made the program director gave her a chance to hear the sound of her laughter. And, so she's texting me this because she thinks this is important for me to know, which totally gives me camp vibes. And since then, I can't help but wonder, what if I can create camp at Flowerwork Farm? Thanks.
Wow, this is the first time I'm hearing these stories, and I am blown away. What do you all think? Yeah. So what we have heard in some of the stories is something, we all know already, which was 2023 was a really bad year. So we had the freezes take down the peach crop throughout New England. We had apples affected throughout the state. And then in July, we had rains and floods that impacted hundreds of farms, the week they were going to harvest for a lot of these farms. But what we may not remember already is that sadly was a string of bad years that farmers have had here in Western Mass. We all know about COVID, but we also had deluges and droughts in previous years. And when you work at an organization like CISA, we all are talking about this all the time and scratching our heads and thinking, what can we be doing? The demand has gone up for everything we do. We're hearing from more farmers. And we decided to do something we had never, ever done before, which is to do a campaign to expand and deepen our programs. So about 18 months ago, we launched this campaign, the Growing Resilience Campaign. Apropos, everyone thinks about similar things at the same time, and we start seeing the word resilience everywhere and growing resilience. And in 18 months' time, we managed to raise over 1.7 million of the 1.8 million target. And with those resources, what we plan on doing is to keep farms farming, to deepen equity and inclusion and all the diversity work we need to do throughout the local food economy, to expand all the local food that's available to people so that no one is left behind, and to encourage you to work with us to ensure that government policy works for local small family farms. So we are close, but we're not quite there. And so what I want to have you know is the two things we all learned at CISA running this first campaign. And one was the generosity and commitment of the way people in the Valley act on their values is unbelievable. And that was just so heartening because we had no idea how this would go. And a lot of you are here today, so thank you so much. Yeah. And the second thing we learned is to finish this campaign, we really need every single person who cares about local farms and local food to participate. So the way this works is you do whatever you can do. We don't want anything more than what you can do, and no gift is too small, and I promise you, no gift is too large. And there's many ways you can give. You can choose the way that works best for you. You can go to the CISA table and drop off a check or some cash. You can do Venmo. You can do the QR code in the program booklet. You can actually go on to buylocalfood.org. All these ways work, and we will so appreciate your support because we have a $25,000 match on the table. So everything you do today will be doubled. And we hope in the next few weeks to be saying back to you, we pulled it off, and we're growing resilience for over 250 farms here in the Valley.
Well, we still have a bunch of exciting stories for you here at Field Notes. I do want to give a shout out, though. The folks at CISA were very kind to give a batch of tickets to NEPM's Media Lab, and they're all sitting over there. Give a hoot, Media Lab kids. These kids come a couple times a week and for a long time in the summer, and they learn how to use all the digital editing equipment and stuff, and so hopefully they're learning what not to do as a host from me on stage here. When I say things like I'm about to say, yesterday I hard-boiled a half dozen of her eggs. And this morning, I scrambled 5 eggs that were hers violently in my kitchen. I get her eggs all the time at the little grocery store right down the street from my house. Her last name is synonymous with poultry. From Diamond Farm in Wendell, please welcome Tessa White Diamond.
Like any farm, my family and I have our morning chores. We need to check the chickens, the cows, the goats. We need to make sure the donkeys and the sheep have their feed. In the warmer months, we need to make sure that the turkeys are okay out on pasture. My grandparents started the farm back in 1936 and raised a dozen kids. It's a lot. Nestled in Western Mass in the small town of Wendell, they went on to raise their brood along with a couple thousand chickens. They taught my mom and her siblings how to work hard, that it's okay to get dirty and be tired at the end of the day. Caring for animals is a huge responsibility. My grandfather used to say that their lives are in our hands, that they rely on us for everything. At first, this was overwhelming to me. At times, it still is. See, I didn't set out to farm. Sure, I had grown up on the farm and helped whenever it was needed. My brother and I would help on Sunday mornings, package eggs with our mom. A couple times a year, we would move the chickens from the brooder house to the laying house. At Thanksgiving time, we would help process turkeys, but I never thought it was going to be my full-time gig. Instead, I was going to be a social worker and save the world that way. My mom, she used to say that she would have been a therapist if she hadn't been a farmer. So with that in mind, either consciously or unconsciously, I went off to college to study social work. I got a job helping the elderly remain safely at home. I did that for a dozen or so years, but honestly, I didn't feel like I was making a difference. I didn't feel like I had enough power to make any real change. Most of my days were spent visiting with elders in their homes, listening to their concerns. While I enjoyed that, I often felt at a loss of how to actually help them. I didn't feel like my role could meet their needs. I tried a few other jobs, but the feeling did not go away. I wanted to make a difference, but in a tangible way. So after many long talks with my family, I moved back home and began learning the family business. It is not a decision that I took lightly, though. While my family is huge, farming hadn't been anyone's true calling. A few relatives had tried making it their full-time career, but for one reason or another, things didn't pan out. I wanted to give it a go. Understandably, though, I was nervous. I wondered, what would my life look like? Was I making a huge mistake? Would I disappoint my family and all that they had built? There was only one way that I could find out. I had to at least try. When I first moved back to the farm, I was overwhelmed by the sheer responsibility of having so many lives in my hands. Now, hear me out. I understand that I just came back from a decade of caring for elders. But this was different. Every second of every day, I had thousands of lives relying on me. I remember being so consumed by the fear of losing even one animal that it took me a long time before I agreed to check the animals on my own. Just think, if I missed a break in the fence, a coyote could get in and wreak havoc with the turkeys. If I missed a heater malfunctioning in a barn, everything could literally go up in flames. If doors were left open between coops, the older turkeys could get in with the younger turkeys, and trust me, it would not be pretty. Over time, though, I became more confident. I learned the different things to look for. I learned to check the feed, the water, the air quality. I learned how to help keep our herds and our flocks safe. Having my family by my side has been crucial. But let's shift gears to a beautiful morning in August. The sun is shining, hardly any clouds are in the sky. We had just had an awful rainstorm the night before, but you would not know it from the gorgeous day that we're having. I'm out with my family and we're checking the animals, and then we see it. My heart just drops. My worst fear has come to life. As we get closer, it's clear that we have stumbled upon a sea of dead turkeys. We have not lost just one turkey. We've lost more than 100. My mind races. What do we do next? How much has this cost us? My only solace is that my family has had the foresight to diversify our farm. The turkeys will become part of the compost, which will be sold in the spring. We will still sell pot pies and soups from our farm store. We will continue to sell eggs across the valley. While this will not make or break us financially, it sure can break your spirit. So, my uncle, he heads to get the tractor, while the rest of us head to the field. We schlepped through the mud, gathering the turkeys as best we can. One point I get on the back of the tractor, and I look up, and I notice the beautiful blue sky, the bright sun that's shining down on all of us, everyone working together. And despite all the devastation around me, I can't help but know that I'm right where I belong, surrounded by my family. I'm supposed to be right here, continuing the legacy that my grandparents started all those years ago. These are my people. This is our farm, our vision. While those are not the last turkeys we ever lost, or will ever lose, I learned one thing that day. The best thing to do in farming is to get up, dust yourself off, and prepare for the next adventure. Thank you.
Tessa White Diamond. You've heard a bunch of stories in English. You've heard a story in Spanish. I think it's really great that CISA has been able to provide the opportunity for people to tell their story in the language that they feel most comfortable telling it in. I'm not very familiar with this language, but I'm excited to hear it in Nepali, translated into English. Please welcome to Field Notes from All Farmers, Tek Magar.
Namaste.
Greetings.
मेरो जन्म भुटानमा भएको हो.
I was born in Bhutan.
म भुटान, इन्डिया हुँदै नेपालमा 2 दिनपछि आइपुगे.
Yeah, I was coming to Nepal from Bhutan and India.
जुन ठाउँ त्यो शरणार्थी शिविर.
Where was the refugee camp?
त्यहाँ साना साना घरहरू थिए.
There was a little small hut.
जुन बाँस, माटो र सिरुले बनिएको थियो.
They were made of bamboo and mud and some sands.
त्यहाँ धेरै मानिसहरू बस्दथे.
There were a lot of people.
त्यहाँ बस्ने मानिसहरूलाई बिहान बेलुकाको छाक टार्न गाह्रो हुन्थ्यो.
The people were struggling with the hand to mouth.
र म र मेरो परिवार त्यही शिविरमा लगभग 23-24 साल बस्यौँ.
Me and my family were living there about 23 to 24 years.
मेरो विवाह पनि त्यही भयो.
I was married there.
मेरो 2टा बच्चा पनि त्यही भयो.
I have two children were born there.
जसो तसो हाम्रो जीवन गुज्रिरहेको थियो.
My life was going there.
र म नेपालमा चाहिँ घर बनाउने काम गर्दथे.
I was working in construction field in Nepal.
त्यहाँ चाहिँ एकदम डेन्जर थियो, खतरा थियो. यहाँको जस्तो सेफ्टी थिएन.
In the construction there were no any safety like here.
र म 2016 मा अमेरिका आएँ.
I came to this country in the year 2016.
जुन मैले नेपालमा गरेको काम मैले यहाँ गर्न पाइनँ.
I didn't work here in a construction field.
मलाई निराश त लाग्यो.
I was frustrated.
र मैले सोच बनाएँ कि याङ्की केटल कम्पनीमा काम गर्छु भनेर.
Then I was thinking I need to work in somewhere. That's why I started working the Yankee Candle.
र बच्चाहरूलाई हेरचाह गर्ने सोच बनाएँ.
Yeah, from there I would able to take care of my 2 children and my family.
र अझै पनि त्यही कम्पनीमा कार्यरत छु.
Yeah, still I'm working in Yankee Candle.
एक दिन म हाम्रै कम्युनिटी नेपाली स्टोरमा गएँ.
Yeah, one day I went to the community, our Nepali community store.
जहाँ हामीले खाने चिज बिजहरू एकदम महँगो थियो
Where our own community commodities were very expensive in those community store.
र म त्यो खानेकुराहरूमा धेरै खर्च गर्न चाहदिनँ थिएँ
Then I don't want to expend a lot of money on those crops or on those vegetables.
र मैले सोच बनाएँ कि म पनि यस्तो सब्जीहरू उमार्छु भनेर
Then after I also decided that is I will also start to grow the vegetables in my field.
र मैले ठाउँ खोजिरहेको थिएँ
That's why I was searching for the farming field.
र इन वेस्ट स्कुफिल बर्ने एभिन्यूमा हाम्रै कम्युनिटी भोटनिस साथीभाइहरूले त्यहाँ धेरै सब्जीहरू उमारेको मैले जानकारी पाएँ
Yeah, finally I got the field in the Barney Avenue where my community people are working and growing the different our own the Beckham crops.
र उहाँहरूलाई मलाई पनि केही जग्गा उमार्न लागि मैले मागेँ र उहाँहरूले मलाई दिए
I request them to give me a small field and they agree and they gave me the field.
र मैले कहिले नगरेको फार्मिङ मैले त्यहाँ सुरु गर्न लागेँ
I didn't have any experience about the farming, but still I wanted to farm. That's why I started to see to the other people.
सुरुमा कहाँदेखि बोट बिरुवा किन्ने मलाई थाहै भएन
Where to buy the seeds and the seedlings, I didn't have any idea.
र मैले त्यहीँ काम गर्ने अग्रजहरूलाई सोधेँ
Then I asked to my elder farmers, that is where I can buy the seeds and the seedlings.
र एकजना साथीले मलाई बिरुवा दिनुभयो
Yeah, one of my friend, he gave me the seeds and the seedlings.
जुन महँगो थियो एउटा बिरुवालाई $10 थियो
Yeah, which was very expensive. I paid for one seedlings about $10.
सुरुमा मैले बारी गर्न थाल्दा धेरै बिरुवाहरू मरे कहिले पानी बेसी लगाए कहिले मल जल धेरै लगाए
Yeah, in the beginning I didn't have any experience. That's why I couldn't do good farming. In the beginning I lost a lot of crops because I didn't have the knowledge about the fertilizer and the water, how much to feed. That's why I lost a lot.
र उहाँ अग्रजहरू आएर मेरो बिरुवा मरेको देखेर हाँस्नुभयो
My brother, the elder farmers, they saw me and they were laughing to look at me. That is how badly I was farming there.
अनि सोध्नुभयो के भयो
Then they were asking me, what happened?
मलाई थाहा छैन
Yeah, he said, I don't know. Yeah.
त्यसपछि मैले त्यो साल जसोतसो मैले आफूलाई खानै हुने गरी मैले उब्जाएँ
Yeah, that year he did like a feast of crops or the harvesting of feast, very little bit, but he couldn't get enough crops from there.
दोस्रो साल मैले धेरै उहाँहरूसँग सिकेँ
Second year he started to learning from them.
र उहाँहरूले सिकाउनु भयो कति पानी लाउने कति मल लाउने सबै उहाँहरूले मलाई सिकाउनु भयो
Yeah, the elder farmers, they show him how much water or when the water he has to, the irrigation system and the fertilizer, that's all the things they taught him.
जुन मैले पहिलो साल बिउ बिरुवा किन्दा धेरै खर्च गरेको थिएँ दोस्रो साल मैले खर्च गर्नु परेन
The first year he expends a lot of money for the seeds and the seedlings, but the second year he didn't.
सेकेन्ड दोस्रो बार सबै बिरुवाहरू मैले घरमै उमारेँ र मलाई धेरै राम्रो भयो
Yeah, second year he prepared the seedlings at his own home.
दोस्रो बार जब मैले बोट बिरुवा बारीमा लगाएँ सबै राम्रो भयो
Yeah, in the second year when he grows his seedlings at home and he replant in the field, then it was growing very nicely.
र जुन मैले फलाएको फलफुल मैले आफ्नै स्वादमा खानु पाउँदा मलाई धेरै खुसी लाग्यो।
Then he was feeling happy that he is growing a lot of crops and he is getting enough crops from his field, and he was feeling happy for that.
जुन हाम्रो नेपाली समुदायको दोकानमा जुन महँगो चिजमा बेचिएको थियो म त्यही दोकानमा अहिले बेच्छु।
In the beginning, where he was buying the crops or the vegetables from our community store, now he is selling his own vegetables in those stores.
र मेरो बच्चाहरूलाई हाम्रै उत्पादकहरू म खुवाउँछु।
And he is feeding his children and family his own production.
र त्यो अर्ग्यानिक छ, स्वास्थ्यको लागि राम्रो छ।
Yeah, it is organic and it is good for health.
र मेरो बच्चाहरूलाई पनि विकेन्डमा लगेर सिकाउने गर्छु।
And he used to take his children to the field to teach them how to farm.
मैले अहिले राम्रो काम गरेको अनुसारले सबै बारीका दाजुभाइहरूले
Now he is working very nice way and he is listening to the elders.
मलाई बोर्ड मेम्बरमा नियुक्त गर्नु आग्रह गरे।
That's why they elected him as a board member of the All Farmers.
र 2023 मा मलाई बोर्ड मेम्बर बनाए।
Yeah, he became the board member since 2023, maybe in May.
र सबैले भन्न चाहन्छु खेतीपाती गर्नुहोस्, अर्ग्यानिक खानुहोस् र आफ्नो स्वास्थ्य ख्याल गर्नुहोस्।
Yeah, he also likes to encourage everybody to grow your products or your vegetables in your own field and have a nice and organic crops in your field and vegetables. And it is good for health.
धन्यवाद।
Yeah, thank you. That's all.
Tek Magar from All Farmers, translated into English by Bhujel. Part of what makes our area so resilient is people like you deciding what you believe in and rallying around it, be it the work of CISA community involved in sustaining agriculture, be it public radio like NEP. We're in the middle of a fund drive right now. I'm contractually obligated to bring this up. 1-800-639-8850. Or be it our food co-ops, which are wonderful. I know a big thank you to River Valley Co-op, one of the major sponsors here. I saw folks from River Valley. I know that the co-ops cooperate with each other. It's so Northampton. So they support Franklin Community Co-op, and they support other co-ops in the area too, like one just shy of the fabulous 413 in Orange. And our next storyteller, yeah, represent Orange. Our next storyteller is a senior lecturer at Tufts University, but a long-time volunteer at one of the newer co-ops in our area, Quabbin Harvest Food Co-op in Orange. Please welcome to the stage, Cathy Stanton.
One of the hardest moments in my involvement with my little local food co-op was the day we had to make a deal with Big Food. So the co-op is in Orange, as Monty said. It's a little mill town that has lost its mills. It has a lot of empty storefronts in the downtown. It has a lot of people struggling to get by. The co-op had opened in one of those empty storefronts a couple of years before I got involved, and by the time I did, it was also struggling to get by. It was really in the weeds and really just trying to keep the doors open and the lights on. I got involved because after the 2016 US election, I was feeling the need to do something hopeful and productive in my own community. And I thought maybe I could help, so I volunteered to join the board of directors. And I found that people were involved for a whole raft of reasons. So there were people like Carl, who had been a minister and a farmer and a banker and was all about regenerating local economies. There was people like Kelsey, who had just come back from college where she'd gotten very excited about food justice projects. There was Mary Ellen, who was retired from the tech sector and involved in a lot of local projects, and that person who always just jumps in to do whatever has to be done to keep them running. And then there's Julie, who's our store manager, who had a lot of experience in the grocery business and was mostly just really excited about local farms and keeping the local agricultural economy growing. And then there was me. So I'm a writer, I'm a teacher, I'm an anthropologist. I knew next to nothing about the grocery business, but I did know a lot about the food system because I'd spent quite a lot of years studying and thinking and teaching about it. Like a lot of people, I started out wondering, how can this modern industrial food system that is so abundant and so convenient not work for everybody? And I wanted to know, what would it look like to have a food system that did work for everybody? And so here was a chance to actually get my hands on a project within my own community and to do some work on that. And it was hard. It was much, much, much harder than I thought it was going to be. It was really just excruciating to be dealing with this negative cash flow and never having enough money to pay all the bills and kind of get a little bit ahead. What made it possible and even rewarding was, first of all, doing it with so many other good people, with so much heart and passion for the project, and so many different kinds of skills and knowledge and experiences. But it also helped that my somewhat nerdy study of the food system turned out to be really useful, at least for me, because it gave me this really broader view of what was going on. And I knew enough to know that you don't have to talk very long about food before you're talking about all kinds of other things that have to do with big questions around social class and race and place and belonging and land and environment and capitalism and climate change and all of those things. And that it felt useful often to open up space for those discussions in the midst of all the day-to-day grind that we were dealing with. Just because it reminded us and told me like why this was so hard. It wasn't just that, that this particular store was struggling, but that it's just really hard to make an alternative. And that it didn't mean we were incompetent or hapless or naive. We were naive, but it was like naive in all the right ways, right? And it showed us that we were doing something that was very possibly crazy, but also really important and quite brave. And I felt like I could really bring my entire self to this in a way that I had not had a chance to do with anything else in my life. So I was sort of firing on all my cylinders and able to use all my experience and who I was, kind of emotionally and socially and politically and intellectually. And strangely, that did feel good. Until the day we had to sit down with Big Food, when Big Food was mad at us. So Big Food in this case is a giant corporation that had been bringing us rolled oats and olive oil and other non-local groceries that our core shoppers had told us they wanted to see in the store if they were going to shop there at all. So they'd been bringing us a delivery every week, but a couple of years into my involvement, we had hit a patch where we weren't paying them every week because for whatever reason, they weren't demanding it. And we were in this position where literally the only things we could pay were what we absolutely had to. So the bills were piling up. And Carl, who was the treasurer, was sounding the alarm and saying, there's going to come a day when they're going to demand that money, and that's going to be a problem for us because first of all, we couldn't pay it. It was well into 5 figures at that point. But also, they were probably going to cut us off and not bring us those groceries that we needed if we wanted to keep those core shoppers shopping. And that if that happened, there was this danger point because it might mean that we'd be sliding down that slippery slope we'd been kind of clinging to the top edges of. And inevitably, that day came. So that's how I found myself with the rest of the finance team, Carl, Kelsey, Mary Ellen, Julie, upstairs in our meeting room, kind of huddled around one corner of a big meeting table around somebody's phone. And out of the phone is coming this very unfriendly, implacable voice of the regional sales manager who was just telling us very plainly there was no room for negotiation. She had heard all of the sad stories, and she was not interested in hearing any more about ours. There was not going to be a payment plan option. There was no other outcome except that we either paid all the money right away, or we wouldn't get any more groceries, which would be that danger point for us. And I just felt like we were talking to a brick wall. There was like a huge divide. And I was on the right side of it, and all these people that I loved and admired were on the right side of it doing the right thing. But it was very tall. And even though I was bringing my whole self to it, my whole self just felt pretty short in that moment. And I couldn't see a way to get across it. And then Carl found a way. He just started talking, and he started telling the woman about Orange. He started describing the empty storefronts and the numbers of people who were on SNAP, the food assistance. He told her about the mission of the co-op, which was to be a resource for everybody in the community. And he mentioned that in the first year of the state's Healthy Incentives Program, which gets fresh fruits and vegetables to people who are on SNAP, our little store was actually the top enroller in the entire state. Yeah. So he told her all that, and then he just stopped and waited, and we all waited. And there was a long silence. And then out of the phone came this sigh. And then the woman said in a really different voice, she said, "You know, it's just not right that there are so many people who can't get enough food, and you're doing a wonderful thing in trying to help." And then we went on and had quite a different conversation, and she did offer a payment plan, which wasn't a perfect plan, but it helped us buy a little time. It got us a little further out of the weeds. It was one of the turning points to get out of that bare survival mode, and which is to where we are now. And it was a turning point for me, too, because it made it clear to me that it's not a big secret that the mainstream food system doesn't work for everybody. It's not a secret to most people that there's something profoundly wrong with that. And it confirmed my sense that there's something profoundly right in being willing to take up a piece of the struggle to make something better. And it showed me that even big food, if you could get it in the right mood, has to admit that too. Thank you.
Cathy Stanton from Quabbin Harvest Food Co-op in Orange. There we go. What's weird? You yelled last time I said Orange. I was trying to get it again. Who's louder, Orange or Media Lab? Media Lab? Orange. I don't know. It's kind of neck and neck. I need to get a decibel meter. Sometimes building a resilient community is dependent upon somebody saying yes when they otherwise might not have said yes. I know in a couple weeks, a lot of people will be celebrating Purim, where they read the book of Esther, and Esther was there for such a time as this, as it says in the Bible. And I love that story because sometimes saying yes at the right time can make a big difference for a community, and that's what our next storyteller did in Holyoke for the Holyoke Farmers Market. Please welcome to Field Notes, Alexis. He upstaged me. Silva de Jesus.
Growing up, I have a lot of great memories of my mom and dad cooking for me and watching the Food Network channels with my older brothers. We would always sit down and flip through the channels, and we would always find the Food Network channel, and that's the one that we never argued about. And we would all watch these great chefs and all these cultures and communities, and chefs like Andrew Zimmerman and Anthony Bourdain, Guy Ferrer, and I can name a bunch more. But those people inspired me and my brothers to go into the kitchen and make the best ramen and the cheesiest omelets that you can ever think of. With that inspiration, I've always wanted to learn more about the food system in the United States. And when I was in middle school, there was a program called Connections, and they were offering a kitchen after-school program, and I was so excited to tell my mom about it. And when I told my mom, she was really excited for me because she was happy that I wanted to learn about healthy living and cooking. And I remember those after-school days like they were yesterday, and learning about kitchen equity and the fundamentals of the kitchen and the rules. That went a long way for me, and I know all those kids that were in that room with me. And I remember making pizza for the first time and making the dough and putting the sauce on the pizza and the cheese and the garlic and all the fresh ingredients for the first time. That really set something in my like heart and my soul to like always go and inspire and connect with people, communities. With that program, like I always went on to looking for more bigger opportunities. And one moment after I graduated high school, I was given the opportunity to do a leadership summit camp where I met Nane Alejandres, which is the community leader in Santa Cruz, California. And he has a nonprofit called Barrios Unidos where he does a lot of food equity and social work. And I was invited to Santa Cruz, California by Nane, where I lived with him for 6 months. And in those 6 months, every weekend, we would wake up early, have some like scrambled eggs, fried potatoes, and hot sauce with me and his wife, Jenny. And we would get in the van and drive to Trader Joe's, where we would organize all the food that we would have to leave behind and grab all the food that we would bring with us. And we would drive back to the headquarters in Santa Cruz, and we did a food distribution that was beautiful and ran so smoothly. I never like seen anything like that, and I wanted to bring that back to my community. So when I came back to Holyoke, I came back with a hunger of like finding people doing these type of things, and I connected with my high school, which I graduated from, which was Lighthouse Holyoke, and I'm an alumni from, and I talked to Catherine Gabron and Carlos Pena, and I told them about what I was thinking about doing with my life and my career, and they opened their arms to me, and they told me they had a spot for me at the school. And that year, I started doing AmeriCorps, Thou Self AmeriCorps, and now I'm doing my second term of Thou Self AmeriCorps at the Holyoke High School, where, yeah. As I'm doing my Thou Self AmeriCorps service, a student walks up to me and he asks me if I worked for the food bank and if my last name was Diaz. And I told him, no, I don't work for the food bank. And yes, my last name is Diaz. Why? And he said, well, I just read an article about you on Twitter. And I was like, that's funny, I don't have a Twitter. Can I see it? And he showed me, and I was really in awe because I didn't know that they were gonna put that article out, and nobody told me about it. And when a student told me, it just was like a full circle moment where I realized that I was looking for a leader, and I became the leader in my own community. I guess one more thing I wanted to say is that food became a part of me and is becoming a part of my day-to-day life, and I'll never forget it. Thank you.
Alexis O. Diaz de Jesus. We have one final speaker, and I'm thrilled to invite her to the stage. She's a true hero of mine. She's the only person who could convince me to stop calling the ridiculous publicity stunt that I do for the food bank, where I push a shopping cart, a ridiculous publicity stunt. I've largely stopped saying it thanks to her guidance. She is a social justice, hunger-fighting badass, if you'll pardon the French. And I'm really excited to welcome to the stage, from Gardening the Community and the Springfield Food Policy Council, our final speaker of the evening, Liz Ogilvie.
I'm moving slow and I'm a little stiff because I forget I'm not 20, and I worked on my compost heap this week. This theme this year, In the Weeds, when I heard it, I thought about not having used that theme for a really long time since I was a server, although back in the olden days, as my 14-year-old called them, they called us waitresses. And we used the term in the weeds when our sections got really full and there were so many people, we couldn't serve them well. Hearing in the weeds made me think about COVID. As a Black person, and as a Black person working in food system change and food access, I live my life in the weeds. Never so much, though, as during COVID. Those were weeds unlike anything I'd ever seen, and they felt like they were going to pull me and everyone else under. Folks were calling from the GTC farm store telling me stories about how many people had come that day asking if we had anything that was spoiling because they had nothing to eat. I had one of the youth we work with send me a text and say, "Miss Liz, can I skip school and work on the farm a couple of days this week just to get more food for my family?" I remember it was April, and my friend Maria Morera, who was the founding executive director of World Farmers, an incubator farm that works with BIPOC immigrant farmers in Lancaster in Worcester County, she called me up nearly in tears saying she didn't know what was going to happen with her farmers that year because most of them took their food to farmers markets. And even though the markets were still operating, they were being told they couldn't come. And I asked her the name of the market manager, and it at the moment didn't ring a bell, but something was familiar about it. And she said, "I know this is about their color." Maria is an immigrant from the Azores, but most of the farmers she works with are Southeast Asian and African immigrants from various countries on the continent. But I had done some work with farmers markets because CISA had asked me to do some training on creating a warm and welcoming environment for all people. So I called this market manager up. I don't know if it's because I'm the oldest in my family or because I work in food. I always think I can fix a thing. And I'm comfortable with the discomfort that comes when we talk about race. So I called her, asked her how she was doing. She told me about all their safety protocols. And then I said, "Well, help me understand why you're telling the World Farmers that they can't come." And she said, "Well, you know, the Chinese brought it here. And the black people, it's spreading like flies, and they're too scary and too risky. They'll scare my customers away." She and I had met at this training, so I said, "You remember I'm black, right?" And she said, "Yes, but not that kind." And she said, "You don't have to worry about it where you come from. You people just don't have to worry about these things." So I conjured up all the home training that everyone in my family had invested in me. And I ended that call politely, even as I was thinking, "I got some you people for you." And I sat there with my head in my hands, not wanting to call Maria and tell her I failed. And I see a text on my phone, "Did you see how much more money the food banks are getting?" And it was some crazy dollar amount. And people who know me know that I say any food is better than no food. But the truth is, for people in my community who have the highest rates in Massachusetts and rival states in the South of diabetes, hypertension, cardiac disease, food bank food is necessary so they don't go hungry, but it's the same kind of commodities food my family had to pick up in the really olden days before we had food stamps. And it's not the food that makes you healthy. So I'm sitting there wondering how I'm going to help the World Farmers. I read this message. I know I don't have any food. And I go on Facebook and write a rant. And I used to say I never do that, but now I do it about once a year because something pisses me off. But in my rant, I talked about how these centuries of inequities had led us to a place where the reason that black people seemed to be spreading it, or at the very least getting it more than everyone else and dying from it, was because we had all these food-related preventable diseases and boxes that had macaroni and cheese in them, mixes, but with no milk or butter to make them, and jars of peanut butter was not going to solve these problems. And a friend who has resources saw it and called me up and said, "What should I do? Should I give the food bank money so they can buy more healthy food?" And I yelled, "No, give it to me." I have to raise money for these two organizations, but I never do things like that. And she said, "What would you do?" And I said, "I would buy the World Farmers food and I'd give it away to people who don't have public benefits or who have them and it's not enough. And I'd put in some backyard gardens because kids are stuck at home with their families and they don't know what to do. And I was a school garden teacher and I knew how to build a 4x8 raised bed." And she said, "Okay." And she didn't just stop there. She called a friend and more friends. And those friends called friends. And by then it was May, and George Floyd had been murdered. And suddenly all these COVID emergency grant opportunities showed up. And maybe they were COVID, or maybe they were just white guilt. In any case, I'd never chased money, but I chased it. And every dollar that came into our fiscal agent, I said, send it to World Farmers, and we raised $300,000 that year. And the farmers were thrilled to know that they were feeding Black and brown people, many of whom came from the same countries they came from. Recently, I'm not talking about me and that really wretched boat ride 400 plus years ago. They were thrilled to be feeding people who really appreciated their food. And Maria and I made a commitment that we were going to do this all the time. We were going to institutionalize it in our organizations. And since then, we have brought nearly $1 million in locally grown produce and proteins to people in the greater Springfield area. And I grew up on commodities and food stamps. And we're well over $1 million now. And people ask me, on top of your organizational budget, you keep raising this money, how do you do it? It was because I was inspired. I think the second or third share box in that first year, and I'm talking about 400 families a year that we feed with these boxes through the entire growing season, and then again in November and in December, there was a little boy who opened the share and saw that there were blueberries. And poor kids don't get blueberries or blackberries or even grapes, because when you get $120 a month for food stamps, there's no room for fruit. And he said, what are these? And I said, they're blueberries. And I too was surprised that there were blueberries in the share. And Maria had sent me a picture of the farmer who grew the blueberries because she knew it would make me happy. And so when this little boy tried them and he said they taste like candy, I said, that's what Farmer Al, the farmer who grew them for you, says they taste like. And I pulled out my cell phone and I showed him his picture. And the first picture that came up were of Farmer Al's hands and then his whole body. And this little boy looked at me and he said, he looks like my grandfather. Black people are farmers? And I said, yes, I'm a farmer. And he looked at me with all this wonder. My grandmother was a sharecropper. Her grandmother was a slave. And I'm a farmer.
This is the first I'm hearing these stories, along with all of you, and I cannot believe the depth and heart and soul and joy and pain and the global path we've just taken to arrive here at the stage with all of you this afternoon. So thank you so much for being here with us. I think you have a flavor for all the heroes and sheroes in the local food economy that bring you your food and grow it and get it to other folks who don't have it. Again, I want to encourage you, if you haven't participated in our Growing Resilience campaign, to give it a shot. We need you. And let's start giving a little love. I'd love to start with our locally grown banjo player, Norma Jean Haynes. And what about our favorite local radio host in the 413, Monty Belmonte? And then we have Cheryl Hamilton from the storytelling group, the Stellar Story Company. She'll make it on stage as she gets here. And I want to share my two amazing coworkers Lisa Goodrich, who took care of everything outside of CISA to make sure all of us could come here for this afternoon together. And also our wizard behind the curtain, Jacob Nelson, who crafted this entire program for all of you. And now we get to show our love and affection for our 10 storytellers. And I want to leave you with one question, one seed to plant deep inside of you, which is, which one of you may leap onto this stage next year and share a little bit of yourselves with the rest of us? I don't care if you're a farmer, a high schooler, or a backyard maple syrup maker. This may be where you need to be next year. So thank you, everyone, for coming. We look forward to seeing you at the sugar houses, the farm stands, the restaurants, and everywhere we find incredible, local, delicious food. Thank you so much.